So, welcome back to another video. Today we cover the Weißtanne, which is the next part of the series, of this tree series we are doing right now. I know last month I didn't upload a lot, but we are gonna, of course, keep on going with the series. So, the Weißtanne, or I think, what is it called? Why is it? Anyways, Weißtanne, let me just put English on here. Weißtanne. It's called in English silver fir, and it usually looks like, let me pull up a picture. The cones look like this, very distinct form with this kind of black or darker color, and when they're still on the tree or still growing, they have this green color. Their needles, according to Wikipedia, they have these white lines like on the bottom of them when they grow, which is also very distinct, and they are very, according to Wikipedia, shadow tolerant. Do you say that even in English? Like, they can tolerate a lot of shadow or darkness, and they are very, I think, very like popular, used in building stuff, like in carpentry basically. They usually look like that. Maybe I can pull up another picture or different ones. Yeah, I think the Blautanne is usually more used in terms of Christmas trees, if I'm not completely mistaken, because I think the Tanne in general, so Tanne in German, fir, or there are different translations, I guess, is the kind of most popular or mostly like associated tree with Christmas. Tannenbaum in German we call it. Baum. Fir tree or Christmas tree, here you see it. So I'm just trying to, I think Blautanne, Nordmantanne, let me just, Weihnachtsbaum, I think, if I remember, Weihnachtsbaum, that, if I remember it correctly, that the Blautanne, so the, what was it called again? Blautanne was the, or blue spruce in English. Here you see spruce and fir are not the same in English, but in German it's all Tanne. I think the more spread apart, what's it called? Zweige or Äste. Branches, basically. They are, this is maybe kind of very distinct for them, that they are not necessarily too densely growing next to each other, you know. But I think Weihnachtsbaum, Baumart, just trying to figure that out. Nordmantanne, so that was because of this question earlier, Nordmantanne or Blautanne, but it's apparently Blaufichte, so maybe I kind of confused it. Blaufichte, so also kind of blue fir or blue spruce, I don't know. Nobilis Tanne, but yeah, we're not gonna go too deep into that, so apparently it's a different species, but in general, tannen or firs or whatever you call them in English are very, I think, the most used in Christmas, at least association with Christmas, or also in Christmas tree production, you could say. And yeah, as we are gonna be translating, we're just gonna do that. So as always, I'm gonna translate word by word in English into English in the German sentence structure, and then I'm gonna translate it in the context. And of course, let me unplug my cable because my laptop might be overloading. I always forget to do that, sorry. So, im Gegensatz zur Fichte fühlen sich die Nadeln der Weißtanne weich an und ihre Zapfen hängen nicht, sondern stehen am Zweig. Sie zerfallen, bevor sie zu Boden fallen. So, im Gegensatz is kind of a saying, you could say. So, im means in dem, so in German, in dem, in the. Gegensatz, gegen means basically, what's it called? Against, you could say. Gegen, general, against, opposite. Gegensatz, Satz means general sentence, or it can also mean in terms of like tennis, it can mean a tennis Satz, so a set basically. But in this case, im Gegensatz, this is, you can't necessarily translate that like against sentence or something like that, but it just means in opposition to, or in opposed comparison to something. Im Gegensatz zu, like zu, zur, to the. Im Gegensatz zur, in contrast, yeah, this is what I'm trying to say. So you can say against sentence, but that of course doesn't make sense, just to translate that literally. Zur, to the, this feminine form because of the R. Die Fichte, feminine. Fühlen, feel, this is also the infinitive, but it's the like plural form, sie fühlen, so the they basically form. So in contrast to the fir, I guess, or spruce, I'm not quite sure, to the spruce, fühlen, feel, sich, themselves. In German, feel is reflexive, so feel, like we say in German, ich fühle mich, I feel myself, ich fühle mich schlecht, ich fühle mich. Now we're gonna say good for this. Good, I feel myself good basically. But in English you just say I feel good. Fühlen sich, so feel, die Nadeln, the needles, der Weißtanne of the, what was it again? White, whatever, silver fir? Yeah, silver fir. Weich an, they feel themselves. Weich means soft. An, anfühlen, that's derived from the word anfühlen, which means to when you touch them, this feeling. So in English it's just feel, but in German there is a difference between fühlen and anfühlen, because anfühlen means, like in this case, when you say in terms of touching something, or when you say how something feels in general to you. But when you say ich fühle, then you're actively doing that. So anfühlen is kind of like more from the outside, I guess. And yeah, fühlen sich weich an, so they feel themselves soft on, you could say, because an means on or at, but of course this doesn't make sense, that was just again to translate that literally. Und ihre Zapfen and her, or in English you would say its, Zapfen, cones, hängen nicht, so hang basically not, they hang not, the cones hang not, or don't hang in English. Sondern, we had that also in some previous episode where I explained that sondern or sonder is always something like apart from some statement, you could say, so different. Sondern, stehen, so they don't hang. Basically in English it's translated but stand, you could say. Stehen means to stand. Am, at the, an dem. Am is always an dem. And Zweig, we had that before, that was branch. So im Gegensatz zur Fichte fühlen sich die Nadeln der Weißtanne weich an und ihre Zapfen hängen nicht, sondern stehen am Zweig. So, in contrast to the fir, feel themselves the needles of the, this is genitive form, silver fir, soft on, you could say, but we're just going to leave that, feel soft, and her or its cones hang not, but stand at the or on the branch. And this is also what I showed you before. Those was Weißtanne. Here, these cones, they don't hang like on, for example, I don't know if this is correct, but let's just say Fichte. Maybe this is not correct. But here, for example, they hang down, which is, I think, the most common case, but maybe I'm wrong. But in general, yeah, they, I think, hang, and here they are standing on top of the branch. Sie zerfallen, bevor sie zu Boden fallen. So, no, let me just translate that in context again. So, in contrast to the, what was it, spruce or fir? I don't know. Feel the needles of the silver fir feel soft and its cones don't hang but stand on top of the branch, I guess. Sie zerfallen, bevor sie zu Boden fallen. They fall apart. Zer means, in general, this is a prefix of verbs that general means to, how do I say that, to a part of, like, go, not necessarily go part because go is the verb, but like part, to be ripped in some case, like to, I don't know if that is too advanced if I say lose the original structure maybe, but I think you get what I mean. So basically to fall apart without the verb falling. So they fall apart. In this case, this is very much fall apart, but it can, for example, also be like zermatschen, which means to matchen, which means to smash. So kind of to go at a, is it called coarsely? Like grob, yeah, or roughly. So like kind of going at something with a hammer, you could say, also is kind of a bit what zer means, because this also indicates that you don't really take, if you do something on purpose, you don't really take, is it caution? I don't know, but like you don't really care. Anyways, this is very, very deep, but actually it's not so deep. So, sie zerfallen, they fall apart, bevor, it's basically almost the same in English, before, sie, they, zu Boden, to ground, fallen, fall. This also we had zu Boden, we had in some previous, let me just, here for example, episode, where I also explained that this is kind of literally, or no, not literally, like, literaric, is this a word? Literarisch, I don't know, literary, but this is kind of slightly poetic because, not poetic, but this is not standard German in the sense that it makes sense because you just put the two words together and form a sentence, but this is kind of a saying. This is kind of what I'm trying to say, that this is not something that would make sense if it wasn't a saying, because zum Boden would basically be the correct translation, not translation, the correct form. Ich falle zum Boden, but zu Boden fallen is kind of a version which was taken from, I don't know, it kind of sounds like Middle Age German, but yeah, or Medieval Age German. So just remember that this is a kind of saying, if you can say that, but this is correct if you see that. Sie zerfallen, they fall apart before they to the ground fall. So they fall apart before they fall to the ground. And yeah, let's go into the main article. Die Weißtanne ist wie die Lärche eigentlich ein Baum der Gebirgsregionen. Sie ist in den vergangenen Jahrhunderten stark genutzt und nicht nachgepflanzt worden. Zusätzlich haben ihr Rauchschadstoffe zugesetzt. Die Holzindustrie konzentriert sich daher mehr auf die Fichte. Die Weißtanne hat ein großes Potenzial im Bau- und Konstruktionswesen, da ihr Holz keine Harzgänge aufweist und deutlich beständiger ist als das Holz der Fichte. Jedoch findet sich recht oft ein sogenannter Nasskern im Holz, der das Trocknen erheblich erschwert. Die Tanne ist eine Schattenbaumart und deshalb ausgesprochen gut geeignet, um in Mischwäldern die Strukturvielfalt zu erhöhen. Sie kann so auch unter dominanten Baumarten aufwachsen und den späteren Wald mit ausformen. Optimalerweise sollte eine gute Wasserversorgung im Boden gegeben sein, die Weißtanne verträgt aber wesentlich mehr Trockenheit als die Fichte. Wegen ihrer starken und tiefreichenden Wurzeln und der größeren Trockenheits- und Temperaturtoleranz wird sie als wichtige Baumart zur Anpassung an den Klimawandel gesehen. So, die Weißtanne, the silver fir. Die Weißtanne, the silver fir, ist es wie, like, or as, in this case like, die Leiche, the larch, eigentlich, originally, generally, I think we had that discussion in the last episode. Ein Baum, a tree, der, which, that, Gebirgsregionen, but in this case, der Gebirgsregion means der means of the, so this is genitive case, I guess. So, the silver fir, diese Weißtanne ist wie die Lärche eigentlich ein Baum der Gebirgsregionen. So the silver fir is like the larch, generally a tree of the Gebirgsregionen. This derives from the word Berg, which means mountain. Gebirge means mountain. What was it? Ridge, range? I always confuse the two. Gebirge, capital G. Mountain range so this is basically a mountain range or mountains. And Gebirgsregionen, so mountain range region or mountain region. So die Weißtanne ist wie die Lärche eigentlich ein Baum der Gebirgsregionen, means the silver fir is like the larch, generally a tree of the mountain regions, or regions. The singular form would be without the en, which is, I think, the most common plural form in German. Sie ist in den vergangenen Jahrhunderten stark genutzt und nicht nachgepflanzt worden. Sie, she, und in English it, ist, is, in, den, the, vergangenen, this derives from the word gehen, which means go. Vergangen, this derives from, like, the conjugated form. Gehen, ich gehe, but the past form, so the first past form, the, what's it called? Präteritum, German Präteritum, past tense, first past tense, preterite, is ich ging, and there you already see the ng coming in. Ich ging, du gingst, wir gingen, sie gingen, and all that. And the second past form, which is the perfect sense, past perfect, I guess, so perfect in German, the same as the word perfect, which also is perfect, but in German you kind of pronounce it differently, like perfect as a noun. And this is wir sind gegangen, for example, wir sind gegangen. And there we see the a coming in, and this derives from that. So vergangen is the, how do I say that, the adjective form of this third past form, or I don't know which it derives from what, but I guess it kind of derives from the verb. Of course it derives from the verb because vergangen derives from gehen, but if Vergangenheit in terms of perfect was first, that I don't know. But it is not important to us right now, so vergangen just means past. Ver, we also had this debate or discussion. We talked about this in also a lot of previous episode where I said that ver is a syllable to indicate that something is not necessarily going the wrong way, the right way, and like going a different way than it maybe should, but in this case it's not necessarily the case, but kind of. So it's vergangen just means it's going in a different way, and this just means past, and also ver is just the syllable to indicate that it's how do I say that is an adjective. And here, by the way, I see vergangenen. Here's a spelling error. Vergangen. Sie ist in den vergangenen Jahrhunderten. This is not correct, so this would have to be vergangenen. So Let me just try to do something. I hope I can do it. Vergangenen. Edit HTML. Kann I? HTML bearbeiten. Because we're gonna do some hacking. Ha ha ha. And then, yeah, we did that. So this would be correct. Sie ist in den vergangenen Jahrhunderten stark genutzt. So in the past centuries, Jahrhunderten. Vergangenen, you have to be careful, not vergangen, vergangenen. Jahrhunderten, the centuries, this derives from the word Jahr, which means year. Hundert, so this is very clear in German, which means 100. And en is, of course, the plural form, which I said here already. So Jahrhundert means just year, 100, so century in English. In English it's not so clear because this maybe more derived from some other language like maybe Latin or something. But in German, year 100, it's very direct. So she or it is in the past centuries. Sie ist in den vergangenen Jahrhunderten stark genutzt. Stark, in English you would say strongly, in German it's just strong, stark, strong, genutzt. This derives from the word nutzen, which means to use, and genutzt means to be used or like used in general, so it is being, sie ist in den vergangenen Jahrhunderten stark genutzt, being used basically. Ge indicates that it's a passive form, so genutzt, used, being used, und nicht, and not, nachgepflanzt. This derives from the word pflanzen as a verb, so to plant something. In English it's also plant and plant. Or you could also say from the noun pflanze, but I don't know which came first, the verb or the noun. And nachgepflanzt, so ge, we already said, is passive, so to be planted, and nachgepflanzt is to be, nach means past or after, and this just means to be, is it that word when I say replanted, like to be planted back, you could say, but in English I don't think that makes sense. But to plant something after it has been, what's it called? In German you say gerodet, cleared, or being gefällt. That's not liked, but der Baum ist, yeah, felled. So don't be confused. Gefällt, if I say das gefällt mir, you say that you could say is liking to me if you want to be very correct, but this is of course not the translation in English, or that is liked by me, kind of, I don't know, but this is just I like that. But gefällt in this case, in which I mean it, is referring to being felled or being chopped off, you could say. And yeah, nachgepflanzt, so being planted right back after being felled, I guess. Worden, so ich wurde, or sie wurde gepflanzt, ist gepflanzt, nachgepflanzt. Worden is the passive form, if I'm correct. Ist nachgepflanzt worden, like is being replanted, I'm gonna say. So this should be the passive form of the past form, if I'm not totally incorrect. And yeah, so she or it, sie ist in den vergangenen Jahrhunderten stark genutzt und nicht nachgepflanzt worden. She, it, is in the past, or passed by, but past century, strongly used and not replanted, being, and so it was being used heavily in the last centuries and not planted back or replanted. Zusätzlich haben ihr Rauchschadstoffe zugesetzt. Zusätzlich, this, we have again this kind of derivation from the word Satz, which means sentence. But zusätzlich, this I think rather maybe derives from the word zusetzen, which means to add or to affect. Like, for example, ich setze, how do I say that? Ich setze dir zu, in terms of emotional things, is, to pressure someone. But zusetzen, what's another example with not this example, which is kind of emotional? Let me think of something. Ich setze, I don't know, for example, this is not really used when I say, for example, ich setze der Backmischung, I don't know, this sounds very sophisticated, like too sophisticated, or like, how to say this, artificial. Ich setze, not with a T, der Backmischung, I don't know, Backpulver zu. Nobody says it like that, but you could say it technically. This just means I add baking powder to the baking mix. But yeah, zusätzlich, and this is funnily enough, it's being used here as I'm just seeing right now. Zusätzlich, so this just means adding to that. Zusätzlich, so addingly, you could say, to be added. I don't know, addingly you could say, but adding to that in English, I think. Let me just have a look. Additionally, yeah. Because Zusatz means add, what's it called? Added. Zusatz. Added, addition. Yeah. Something like that. Haben ihr, have, her, or to her, Rauchschadstoffe. This means smoke. Rauch means smoke. Schadstoffe, this derives from the word schaden, which means to damage. Schadstoffe, so Stoff means in general fabric. Let me just see the other translations, because I don't remember all of them. Material, fabric, substance, yeah. Cloth, I don't know. Matter, cloth, I think. And yeah, so substance, yeah, you could also say substance. But Rauchschadstoffe means smoke, damage. In this case, substances, not substances. Materials, I don't know, like Schadstoffe means Schadstoffe. Pollutants, yeah. This means pollutants, because that derives from the word schaden, which means to damage, and der Schaden means the damage. And yeah, so smoke pollution, zugesetzt, and here we have this, I mean, in this case, of course, it's not necessarily emotionally, because emotionally, what I said earlier is maybe a bit wrong, kind of, but zusetzen means to pressure someone, jemandem zusetzen, so you always have to have an object or in terms of a sentence, it's probably called an object to do that too. So ich setze ihm zu, I think in most cases will mean I pressure him, because I think I can't really remember any other examples where zusetzen is not meant in that way. Ich setze, only the word zusätzlich I remember, but this is also with an instead of an e, or in German e. But yeah, so adding to that, have, her, or it, smoke pollution, puts pressure on, or something like that. So it has not favored it, basically. So die let me just translate that. So I'm just gonna ask Google, because it's kind of a bit difficult to translate that. In addition, it has been contaminated, with smoke pollutants. This is maybe a better way to say that. Die Holzindustrie konzentriert sich daher mehr auf die Fichte. The Holz, which means wood, industry, or is it called lumber? I don't know. Holz, if I remember that correctly. Timber and lumber or something. So the wood industry, konzentriert, you could say concentrates, or focuses itself, sich itself, daher. This means therefore or because of that. You could say da, there, that just means there or because of. Her, to like go, how to say that, go towards, in this case, me, you could say, because her is always referencing to a different, you could say, reference point. So when I say come here, for example, I say come here or come to me. This is not here, but in English it's translated in this case here, but here just means to me or to whatever reference point you have, or whoever says that. So daher, this is not there and come to some point, but this is just because of that. So focuses itself because of that. Mehr, more, auf, on, or on top, but in this case, auf, focus on, so it's rather on. Die Fichte, the spruce or fir, what was it again? I think it was spruce, right? Yeah. So the wood industry focuses itself because of that more on the spruce. So, die Weißtanne hat großes Potenzial im Bau- und Konstruktionswesen, da ihr Holz keine Harzgänge aufweist und deutlich beständiger ist als das Holz der Fichte. The silver fir has großes big Potenzial, potential, in the Bau, which means construction or building something, like as a verb, and Konstruktions, Bau und Konstruktion. In English you would probably in both cases say construction, maybe rather carpentry, but it's kind of the same. Wesen, this is I would say kind of special word, because Wesen, not special, but can have different meanings. So Wesen in general means a being, a creature, you could say. Also it can mean the nature of something. So Konstruktionswesen is the, you could say, being of construction work. And da ihr Holz keine Harzgänge aufweist. As her wood, so construction being, as her wood, its wood, keine, no, Harzgänge. I think, if I'm being correct, let me just have a look at that. Harzkanal. I thought Harzgänge. Well, I thought Harz in general means resin. But Harzgang, I thought that would mean, this means resin vein. This is the correct thing. It appears to be like the veins, or I thought pores of resin. So, but what I thought was Harzgang, like in terms of pouring out of resin. So that's resin, is pouring out of the wood when it's being cut, because this is kind of the bleeding of wood when it's being cut to stop the wound. And this is what I thought, because Gang can also mean that something is running, you could say. So I thought this is just a pouring, but apparently it's this really vein, so it's really figurative, the Gänge, because Gang not only means the way you walk, passage, course, or passageway. It also means passageway, so, or aisle, like something where someone can walk through, or corridor. And apparently it looks like this. Axialer Herzkanal. Yeah, this is very advanced stuff. Of course, you can read it in English or whatever language your mother's tongue is and learn more about it, but we're not gonna do that right now. So, as is would, doesn't, or no, Herzgänge. So, resonant veins, aufweisen. Let me take a sip of water. So, aufweisen means on, like auf in general means on, but weisen, so for weisen or, yeah, there are a lot of meanings. First of all, which is not the meaning in this case, weise means either wise, to be wise. It can mean the way. It can mean a wise man, or a no, that was the word with the A, right? I thought this was different, but don't be confused because this means an orphan, and this means way, or means someone, der Weise, for example. Der Weise means a wise man. Die Weise means the way. And die Weise means the orphan, or der Weise. I was kind of confused because I thought it was written with an E, but it's not, of course. But it was just in my mind. And aufweisen is, of course, with the E. So this rather derives from die Weise. This means the way, but weisen in terms of the verb means not to be confused with weisen, which is sometimes written as this, or maybe this, I'm not quite sure. I think with 2S, or I'm always not quite sure of the color white. I think it's written with like a sharp S, we call it in German. So this letter, but I'm not quite sure. Let me just. Wird weiß mit S oder S geschrieben. I'm not quite sure always. Yeah, I thought it was written with so that's correct. Yeah, this is of course not correct. Yeah, I think this is the general correct form, and I already wrote it, so that is correct. But sometimes it's written with this. So this is just to whiten something. But yeah, this is not what we need right now. So weisen means to show or to point, for example, the way to a certain goal. For example, when I say, ich weise dir den Weg, I'll show you the way. So this is really kind of guiding, you could say. And aufweisen means also kind of guiding, or rather showing something, but in this case, aufweisen, because of the auf, it means that it's showing itself, kind of, you could say. And deutlich beständiger ist als das Holz der Fichte. So, to show itself up, whether there are anyways where we are with this word. So, to on show, you could say, on show, aufweist, because it's S aufweist, so das Holz, because it's das Holz is neutral, aufweisen, es weist auf, weist auf, so this just means to, it points to, it shows something, it's like different specific things. Es weist auf, es weist keine Herzgänge auf, for example. So, it doesn't show any resin veins, you could say. So, and now we continue with the other sentence. Und deutlich, and deutlich means a lot, like very clearly, or in this case a lot. Beständiger, this derives from the word deuten, which can either mean to interpret or to indicate also can mean to point to something. But yeah, deutlich means very clearly, because I don't know, I'm not gonna get into that. Beständiger derives from the word stehen, stand in English, so it's kind of derives from the word maybe stand, which is also, yeah, in English is status, but I'm just saying stand in German is the stand, or status you could say, but like for example, Saftstand, this is not what I'm saying. Yeah, this can also be level, but ich stehe am I'm starting out the juice stand. Yeah, I'm just trying to say that stand means the noun of standing, and in German, ich stehe, the past form is ich stand, and there you can see why English derives from German, because it's in the end always deriving from some form of that. And beständiger, Bestand, there's the word Bestand, which means the inventory or stock of something. Like for example, in German we say eingekochtes Gemüse or whatever, preserved vegetables. And beständiger, so Bestand can mean inventory, but beständig in general means, it's kind of similar because it means very durable, I think. Beständiger is the comparative form, so the second form, instead of like right before being the most, so more durable, I guess. Beständiger should be there. More consistent, yeah. So it is more consistent. Und deutlich beständiger is, and a lot more consistent is, als, than, can also mean in terms of time, like when, but beständiger ist als, than, das Holz der Fichte, the wood of the spruce. So, that was a very long sentence. The silver fir has big, we're just going to read it again in German. Die Weißtanne hat großes Potenzial im Bau- und Konstruktionswesen, da ihr Holz keine Harzgänge aufweist und deutlich beständiger ist als das Holz der Fichte. Die Weißtanne the silver fir has big potential in construction, like the construction, I don't know, how do I translate that? Construction being, civil engineering, interesting. In civil engineering, as its wood doesn't show any resin veins and is a lot more consistent than the wood of the spruce. And yeah, so next sentence, jedoch, but, or though, I think though is more correct, findet, finds, itself, sich, itself, recht. Recht can also have different meanings. I think we also went about that in the last episode. Recht as a noun means right, the right to something, and recht, not to be confused with rechts, which means right as a direction. And recht means relatively in this case. So, though finds itself relatively often, oft means often, a sogenannter, genannt derives from the word nennen, which means to name or to call. So, sogenannter, so called, genannt, and the er is because of the form, der Nasskern, genannter, which is here. So, so, like so called in English, genannt, being called, you could say. So, ge plus nennen equals genannt. And it's also kind of the past form. So, for example, like, ich habe dir einen Namen genannt. So, I gave you a name, but yeah, I have you a name called or named, you could say, but I gave you a name. Ein sogenannter, a so-called Nasskern, which means nass means wet or moist, but rather wet. Kern means core, so a wet core, you could say, which I think is referring to the Holzkern. I mean, it's definitely referring to that, but not this brand. No, Holzkern, Tanne. Why is it? This is annoying. Holzkern. Holzkern or Holzmitte maybe. Which you would have to remove if you were to work with wood, because that is where it's always splitting, which can be annoying. And this is why you almost never see when you buy wood somewhere that is from the middle, where there's a lot of pressure when it dries, and it's always from the sides at least when it's good. But sometimes they sell wood with cracks in it, and this is almost always when it's close to the middle of the wood, of the, what's it called, stem. Yeah, stem, but this is not what I'm trying to say. Of the yeah, you could say. But I'm just saying that this is, here we see it. This is where it's always splitting. This is where it's always taken from the sides, where there's not a lot of pressure. And it's always split in here. So you would have to take the core out, because there's also a lot of water in there. And yeah, here for example you see it's taken from the side, and there's not a lot of, basically no splitting of the wood. Yeah, so Nasskern, this is this basically. And im Holz, in the wood, der das Trocknen erheblich erschwert, which we just said, which the or that the Trocknen, so the drying. This derived word trocken, which means dry. Erheblich, this derived word heben, which means to lift up, raise, increase. Erheblich, erheben, also raise up, but this has slightly different meanings, which I'm trying to think of something. Erheben, heben. Erheben is, I think, rather when you're already on the ground. Like, erheben is rather in terms of persons or people when they like just stand up. But this is very kind of poetic, like in children's stories maybe. This is only ever heard, because this is the only instance I can think of where I've definitely heard it. Ich erhebe mich. Or yeah, this is very kind of poetic, you could say. And erheblich, this is not poetic, but this just means massively or really much. And so this, I don't know where it comes from, like why this is in this way used, but erheblich probably because it's increasingly. So, but it doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with raise, but probably because the level of something is raised, so it's increasingly whatever. Erschwert in this case, so it's increasingly, this derives from the word schwer, which means schwer. Heavy. And erschweren, this is where this derives from, this is just the past form, means to complicate. So that which the drying process massively complicates. So though finds itself fairly or relatively often a so-called wet core in the wood, that the drying process increasingly complicates. So Let me have a sip again of my water because my throat is getting dry. Yeah. So the we did that. So the spruce, tanne, what was it again? Fir? I don't know. Because fir is, in a German mind, more associated with Fichte because it's more similar and all of that, but yeah. Die Tanne, the fir, ist eine Schattenbaumart. Oh, I'm just going to read that sentence. Die Tanne ist eine Schattenbaumart und deshalb ausgesprochen gut geeignet, um in Mischwäldern die Strukturvielfalt zu erhöhen. The fir is eine Schattenbaumart. Schatten means shadow. Baum means tree. Art means, in this case, species, but can also mean type, kind of, or kind, like kind of. Und deshalb, therefore, this, or it's half, but I'm not going to get into this, just means therefore. Ausgesprochen, this can be a bit confusing because ausgesprochen in general means pronounced, but I think in English there's also a word called pronouncingly, I don't know if I'm spelling it correctly. I don't know if this is correct, but this is pronouncing. Maybe this is. I can't really. Pronouncingly great. I don't know if this is a sentence, but if this is a word to use, but I think I've heard that somewhere, but I'm not quite sure. Anyways, so Schattenbaumart und deshalb ausgesprochen gut. So, ausgesprochen means pronounced, because there's the rest from the word sprechen, which means to speak. And gesprochen is the perfect form and the passive form, because it's, I think, if I'm not being completely mistaken, it's always the same, the passive and the perfect form. Ich bin gewandert, wir sind gewandert, I don't know, es ist gewandert, nee, es wurde gewandert, something like that. This is just from the word wandern, which means hiking. Or, for example, ich bin gelaufen, es wurde gelaufen. Yeah, this is from the word laufen, which means to run, and gelaufen, which also can have a different meaning of being, like, for example, das ist für mich gelaufen. This means that's it for me, that's done. Like, I don't care about that anymore. In terms of kind of losing something which you cared about, I don't know. So, deshalb ausgesprochen, so I think that means pronouncingly, but I'm not quite sure. Also, I'm not quite sure if pronouncing, I think it's written with a U only, but like pronounce, or is it pronounce? I'm always not quite sure, because there's also like pronunciation. Kind of confusing, because why is there not an O now? I don't know. It's just confusing. Anyways, so ausgesprochen, so it's very, ausgesprochen in this case just means very good, but in general it means said out loud or spoken, but no, rather said out loud. Ausgesprochen, out. No, actually isn't it like outspeakingly? I'm not quite sure. Let me just ausgesprochen. Yeah. It's not what I meant. Outright. Isn't there a word called outspeakingly? I'm not quite sure. Sounds very, artificial, but I'm not quite sure. Because I think I've heard that somewhere. Yeah, but it just means something else. Open-hearted. Interesting. So, ausgesprochen, very gut, which means good or well in this case. Geeignet. This the rest of the word. Eignen, which means to be suitable, or for example in the word aneignen, it means to acquire, because there's also the rest of the word eigen, which means own, basically. Mein eigenes Buch, for example. My own book. And, or for example, das ist sehr eigen. This is very peculiar. And eigen, like the verb of it is basically eignen, but this just means to acquire something, kind of. So no, this is with aneignen, but eignen in general means to be suitable for something. I don't know where and at which point it came from eignen, from eigen, because be suitable and be something own to somebody, or owned by somebody. I don't know in which way this connects, but in general, eigen, whatever, it is either suitable or to be owned by in some kind of way. And I mean, I can kind of see where it comes from, but yeah. So geeignet, so means, I was about to say being owned, but that is incorrect. So it is be suitable. But yeah, if you were to think of it, you can see a way in which it means to be owned by somebody, but that would also sound very like medieval German poetic. So yeah. Anyways, that was a long excursus for basically not a lot. So gut geeignet, very much suitable or very well suited. So the fir is a shadow tree species and therefore very much well suited, in Mischwäldern die Strukturvielfalt zu erhöhen. To or for, in Mischwäldern, in mixed woods, you could say. So this means wood types, and where trees of different species or different kinds, but I think live. But I think that rather relates to the fact that there are being two main kind of different species. It's not species in that kind, but like Nadelbäume, which we also had in the last episode, conifers, and Laubbäume, where the main difference, except for the large, is that the needle trees or conifers, they don't lose, they don't lose their needles in the winter, and they don't turn any other color, like for the deciduous?
Conifers, deciduous trees.
Yeah, deciduous trees, you probably haven't heard that, because it didn't record. And because Laubbäume are, so deciduous trees, they of course turn to another color, and the trees lose these leaves for, I think, energy saving apparently. And Nadelbäume, they don't. They just lose their cones, and they keep the color of the needles of the trees. And yeah, this is with the 4 different, what's it called, Jahreszeiten, seasons of the year, of course, having to do with that. And this is Mischwälder. I think this refers to the 2 different types of woods, you could say, or tree species, with the conifers and deciduous trees living together, but maybe I'm just completely wrong, because I'm not quite sure. Mischwälder. Yeah, needle or conifers and deciduous trees. So, in Mischwäldern in mixed tree, mixed wood types, you could say. Mixed forest, yeah. In mixed forests. In mixed forest, the Struktur means structure, Vielfalt means diversity, so the structural diversity. Zu erhöhen, this derivation word hoch, which means high. Höher means height. And erhöhen means to increase, make something higher, raise. So to raise the structural diversity. Let me just have a look what that means in this case, maybe. This is just referring to another article. But yeah, beautiful. So, die Tanne, the spruce, the fir, is a shadow tree species and therefore very well suited to raise the structural diversity in mixed forests. Sie kann so auch unter dominanten Baumarten aufwachsen und den späteren Wald mit ausformen. So, she or it can, so, this way, so, auch, also, unter, among, or in general it means under, but in this case it means among, dominant Baumarten, tree species, aufwachsen. We also had that, I think, in the previous episode where I explained that wachsen derives from the word, in a different meaning it derives from the word wachs, which means wax, but in this case it just means to grow up, because wachsen means to grow in this case, and aufwachsen means to grow up, so quite literally the same as grow up, except the up basically in German is like the prefix for this word. Und den späteren Wald mit ausformen. And the späteren later Wald, forest, mit ausformen. With, can you say form out? I don't think so, but to, form in general you could say, so she can or it can also, or it can this way also, among dominant tree species grow up, and the later forest with, you could say create, to form, to, ausformen maybe, I'm just going to say that. To shape the later forest. So it can also grow among dominant tree species and form or shape the later forest. Or take part in the shaping of the later forest. Optimalerweise sollte eine gute Wasserversorgung im Boden gegeben sein. So, optimalerweise, this just means in the most optimal case. Weise, we also had that before. Weise can mean way. It can, Weise. In this case, it can only mean way, but in other forms, it can also have different meanings. For example, Weisen. But in German, there's always a difference because of the uppercase and the lowercase w. In German, we call it V. So, and so optimalerweise, in the optimal way, you could say. Optimaler, it's kind of comparative form, so more optimal. But yeah, optimalerweise is just another word. So in the most optimal way, or a case of course, sollte, should, a gute, or feminine, because die Versorgung is feminine. The supply. Should a good water, Versorgung means supply, yeah. This, by the way, derives, I think we also had that in some previous episode, Sorgen, to worry, to provide, take care. Die Sorge, for example, means the worry. Sorgen, für jemanden sorgen. We always shorten that with this, but jemanden Sorgen means to care for someone or take care of someone. And Versorgung rather derives from this, für jemanden sorgen or jemanden versorgen. Jemanden versorgen, which means to provide for someone. So Wasserversorgung, Versorgung, here you see versorgen, and if you take that away, versorgen, in general, but Versorgung is the noun, so this means the supply. So optimally should a good water supply im Boden, in the ground, in the soil, gegeben means being given, passive form of geben, which means to give, sein, so it should be given, pretty much the same in English. Die Weißtanne verträgt aber wesentlich mehr Trockenheit als die Fichte. Die Weißtanne, the silver fir, verträgt, this derives from the word tragen, carry, or wear. And vertragen means to be able to carry, basically. And also vertragen can mean when you had a fight with someone and you say, ich vertrage mich mit dir. Then you say, how do you say that? I like kind of make peace with you, if you get what I mean, like to end the fight or the argument. And or for example, when you have like two little kids which don't like each other, you say sie vertragen sich nicht, so they don't like each other kind of, or they don't get along with each other. Also in terms of not just people but like plants or whatever, but I think it will have to be something doing action, because there you see that something is not getting along with something else. So, die Weißtanne verträgt, so it's is able to carry, or you could also say get along, but yeah, would be in terms of with something else, but in this case it's rather be able to carry. Aber, but, although, wesentlich, here we also have this Wesen, but this is not necessarily a meaningful thing here. So wesentlich, I mean, I think it derives from it because it's meaning being, something with being like a, how to say the wesentlich, like it in general means a lot or clearly, but I think it just derives from something like I don't know how to explain it, like being, you can see it, something, I can't explain it right now, but it just says a lot more. You can Google it if you want to. Mehr Trockenheit, more dryness als die Fichte, than the spruce, more dryness than spruce. So optimally should a good water supply in the ground given be, or being given be, or I don't know. Die Weißtanne, the white silver fir, is able to carry, but though a lot more dryness than the spruce. So, wegen ihrer, no, we have to do that again in the context. So, optimally, a good water supply should be given in the ground, but the silver fir is able to carry a lot more, or to bear a lot more dryness than the spruce. So, wegen ihrer starken und tiefreichenden Wurzeln und der größeren Trockenheits- und Temperaturtoleranz wird sie als wichtige Baumart zur Anpassung an den Klimawandel gesehen. So, wegen, because of, not to be confused with the word Wege, which means ways or paths. Wegen ihrer, her, or its strong und tiefreichenden and deep or deeply. Reichend, there's the word reichen, which means to reach, not to be confused with the word die reichen, which means the rich. Tiefreichend, so deep reaching, tiefreichenden Wurzeln, Roots und der größeren Trockenheits- und Temperaturtoleranz, and the bigger dryness, or isn't it called drought? Drought. Yeah, drought. And temperature tolerance. Wird is being, sie, she or it, als, as important tree species, Baumart, tree species, zur, to the or for the, Anpassung, which means the what's it called? Anpassung, to fit into. I have to translate that. Adjust, yeah, or adjustment, and in, at the or to the, climate change, Klimawandel, climate change, gesehen, being seen. So, or seen. Wegen, because of its or her strong and deep-reaching roots and the bigger drought and temperature tolerance is being, she or it, as important tree species, or as an, you could say, important tree species for the adjustment to the climate change scene. So, because of its strong and deep-reaching roots and the bigger drought and temperature tolerance, is being seen as an important tree species for the adjustment to the climate change. Well, that was it for today. That was a long video. I hope you liked it. Leave a like or comment if you enjoyed the video or just want to say something. And yeah, that was it for today. See you in the next episode. Bye!